Coming up on today's Locked On Dodgers, Carlos Correa won't be signing with the Dodgers because he signed with the Giants. What does that mean for the Dodgers at shortstop? Are the Giants now an actual contender in the NL West? And that probably puts them out of the running for Carlos Rodón. So can the Dodgers step up in that and make him an offer? That's what's on tap. So make sure to keep it locked on Dodgers.
You are Locked On Dodgers, your daily Los Angeles Dodgers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yo, Dodger fans. Welcome to Locked On Dodgers. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, the number one local sports daily podcast network. Locked On, your team every day. This is Locked On Dodgers, the daily podcast talking about the Los Angeles Dodgers, bringing you the smart fans perspective on our boys in blue. You can find us wherever you find podcasts and on YouTube simply by searching for Locked On Dodgers. And if you want it delivered straight to you, subscribe in both of those places and you'll get that notification direct to your phone. Open it up and you're here listening to us for about 30 minutes every weekday morning. If this is your first time listening or watching, I'm Vince Samperio. My co-host here is Jeff Snider. And we're both guys that have been Dodger fans their entire lives and will continue to be Dodger fans more than likely for our entire lives. And we both cover the Dodgers currently. We both really like baseball, and we both try for the most part to be here every weekday morning for you for about 30 minutes. And I say emphasis on the try because Jeff had to muster up and try and working against his body right now to record this episode because Carlos Correa signed with the Giants.
Yeah, I had just got done texting Vince saying, "Hey, can you go solo tonight? I'm battling a migraine. I'd like to get to bed early." And then it was 10 minutes later that Correa signed. And so it's like, oh, I guess I got to man up and do this podcast, which, I always love talking about the Dodgers. And this is it's a fun topic to talk about because this is some juice. You said on Twitter, and I think it was a really good point. The Dodgers Giants rivalry has been a little bit boring ever since Madison Bumgarner left. There hasn't really been a villain. And the Dodgers Giants rivalry historically has had a lot of villains over the years. And so, Brandon Crawford's greasy and gross, but he's not really a villain. Brandon Belt has that weird 8-foot long neck, but he's not a villain, but Madison Bumgarner, that dude, he tried to kill Puig for looking at him, tried to kill Muncy for not even celebrating a home run. That's the juice this rivalry needs. And Carlos Correa, I don't know if you know this, Vince, but Dodger fans already actually don't like Carlos Correa very much.
Yeah, he will now get booed in his third different uniform at Dodger Stadium once he plays for the Giants at Dodger Stadium this year. And yeah, like I said, the even in 2021 when they were going at it, having both historic seasons, having a crazy last month of the season where they're basically going toe for toe, punch for punch. There was no type of animosity. There was no type of anything.
Darren Ruff and Austin Slater.
Yeah, it was.
That sounds like the Duke lacrosse team.
Yeah, you could try to not like, Brandon Crawford. You could try to not like Logan Webb. You could try to not like some of these guys, but realistically, they're just kind of guys. There weren't anybody there. In steps in Carlos Correa, 13 years, no trade clause, no opt-outs. Realistically, he's going to be there at least 6-7 years, probably more, depending how that contract ages and how he ages. So now the juice is there for that. The Dodgers also signed Ross Stripling, so that'll be fun. Ross Stripling was part of that 2017 team. They signed him to a 2-year, $25 million deal. So two of the guys we talked about yesterday, or two of the guys you picked yesterday off the board, free agents. But they also signed Sean Manaea the other day. They've also signed Mitch Haniger this offseason. The Giants have made the moves. They now have the big move. Is this now a 3-team race in the NL West, do you think?
I might have to run back to tape. I think you actually said the Dodgers signed Stripling, the Giants signed Stripling. Maybe I misheard you, but yeah, the Giants are definitely going for it, and we knew they were going to go for it. They tried to get Aaron Judge. That didn't work out. They went with Mitch Haniger instead. But they got their man in Correa, and the Giants, I don't think they were as good as they played in 2021. But I also don't think they were quite as bad as they played last year. And so I think they're probably talent-wise coming into the offseason, they were probably a 85-ish win team, and they've added some good players. There's also the fact that as we're going to talk about in a little bit, they're probably not going to have Carlos Rodón next year, which knocks some of that off. But Carlos Correa is a better player than Brandon Crawford was, even at Brandon Crawford's best. Carlos Correa is probably the best shortstop in baseball. And I should say right here, it wouldn't surprise me if the Dodgers shortstops outplay Carlos Correa. I'm actually just saying that for the guy on YouTube who accused me of always just being a homer for the front office and always saying that whoever signed the Dodgers players are going to outplay him. No, I wanted Carlos Correa on the Dodgers. I've said it many times, and it kind of sucks that he's going to the Giants because he's really, really good. And chances are he's only 28 years old. Chances are he's going to continue to be the best shortstop in baseball for at least the next few years.
Yeah, and it's one of those where honestly, it's the Dodgers are kind of a unfinished book at this point in terms of their roster, so it's hard to say, but this puts the Giants up there, for sure as a contender for the NL West. I don't know, they'll have to a little bit of bounce back. Logan Webb still had a good year, but wasn't quite like the dominant force he was 2021. They still have to figure out the pitching. I mean, if they can pull some levers, as Andrew Friedman likes to say, for Sean Manaea. Maybe they can make him serviceable. Ross Shipley is serviceable. They'll have serviceable guys, and they'll have some good arms in the bullpen. Their lineup's still not all the way there, but if some of these guys stay healthy and produce like Mitch Haniger and Jock Peterson's there, then they'll have some thump. They'll have some offense better than they had in the years past, and now they have the superstar to go along with it. So it's one of those where at this point for the Dodgers, you're kind of like, all right, maybe, it going into this next season without having crazy expectations, maybe some people are going to pick the Dodgers to finish third in the division. It's very possible. It makes it a little bit more intriguing and it makes it more fun, at least for us. It's not that it's not fun winning 111 games, but it is kind of fun kind of being in the thick of it and having to fight every day for it.
Yeah, and as much fun as it was last year to clinch early and have a stress-free last month of the season, that probably cost the Dodgers. I think, really that's the only, if there is an explanation other than bad luck of getting cold at the wrong time, I think it would have to be that the Dodgers got to the playoffs not having played a meaningful game you know, in literally a month since they clinched, and realistically more like, 2.5, 3 months since there was any doubt. They were playing for nothing most of the season. And so, it might be fun to have them. I still think the Dodgers are going to be I think they're going to do some moves still. I don't think the team we see right now is what they're going to go into spring training with. Whatever they end up showing up to spring training with, they're going to be a 95 win team at least, I would think. And so, it's going to be a battle. But I think it'll be fun to have multiple teams. Even the Diamondbacks seem like they're going to try to be decent. They've got some decent young players. They've got a couple guys that I'm already annoyed by because they're so like that Alec Thomas kid. Like, dude, stop being so good everywhere in the outfield. Like, so they've got guys. And so, I mean, really everybody except the Rockies seems like they're trying to win. And the division is definitely more exciting when everybody's trying to win.
You got the NL West doing that. You got the NL East who had 3 playoff teams last year. All 3 of those teams added to some degree. Maybe the Braves didn't necessarily add anyone, or they did add, Sean Murphy. But so there's legitimately going to be a fight for playoff spots next year because that's 3 teams in the NL West, 3 teams in the NL East, and then probably only 1 team in the Central. Maybe the Brewers and Cardinals can both, play up to some ability. So then you got some fight going. So yeah, it makes for it to be fun. It's hard for us to really judge so far because the Dodgers they literally have to make moves. They don't even have a full like everyday starting lineup at this point, or I mean they do, but not with above average players, I guess.
Yeah, they've got 4 open spots on their 40-man roster, so they definitely have plans to do something. We just don't really know what yet at this point.
One of those things they can do something is at shortstop still. Carlos Correa is officially out, so we'll talk about shortstops. But first, let's talk about BetOnline because today's episode is brought to you by BetOnline.net, your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. Get all the odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from pro football to college bowl season to basketball and World Cup. They've got it all at BetOnline.net. There's only a handful of World Cup matches. You got the match this morning and then you have the finals and the third place game. So head to betonline.net, get all the odds and trends for those. They got sports podcasts there as well, so check that out. And they're the fastest and easiest way to get your betting info. Head to betonline.net on your laptop or mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, Jeff. So Carlos Correa officially gone. It was, more of a pipe dream than anything, just based on what the market was shaping up to be for the Dodgers to get him, considering they didn't seem likely to go for a long-term deal. Now, all three of the top four shortstops have signed a deal that's 11 years or longer, all for $280 million or more. That leaves Dansby Swanson as one of those. I don't think, well, who knows? I wouldn't have thought he was going to get 10 plus years before the offseason. I definitely didn't think he was going to get 250 plus mil before the offseason. And you got some teams that didn't get any of the other top three shortstops that might be desperate. The Dodgers aren't one of those teams that are desperate. There's, Willie Adames has been named a lot. Tim Anderson's been named. Both of those teams have said those players won't be traded. What are the Dodgers going to do at shortstop? Are we really going to see Gavin Lux every day or as the opening day starting shortstop for the Dodgers?
It wouldn't surprise me at all if Lux is their starter on opening day. Uh, this feels like it might be a situation where some of the needs the Dodgers wait and assess at midseason at the trade deadline because, you know, it might make sense to give Gavin Lux a shot at shortstop. And if it doesn't work, or if, Michael Busch or whoever's the second baseman doesn't work, then they can address that at the trade deadline. Obviously free agency, most of the time free agency is a more preferred route just because you only have to give up money. And in a trade, obviously you have to give up assets. On the other side, usually guys you're trading for aren't getting paid as much as guys you're signing. And so it's a literal trade-off, pun not originally intended, but leaned into there at the end. It was, so yeah, we never know what the Dodgers are going to do. They surprise us all the time. They could have a deal in the works right now, and we wouldn't know about it until it gets broken. But yeah, if I had to put money on something at betonline.net, I would probably bet on Lux being their starting shortstop on opening day. But I'm mostly glad I don't have to put money on anything because I'm not super confident in that.
Because there's not a lot out there after Swanson, and like we said, we mentioned Adames, we mentioned Tim Anderson, both of them supposedly going to stay, which means it'll probably cost a little bit more to try and get them. There's not really any team that's not playing to win that has a shortstop that would be available. I guess, maybe the Cubs with Nico Horner, but he's still young enough, and the Cubs, in theory, are trying to win, if not next year, the year after that. So there's really not anybody there. The next name is one of the names that you talked about yesterday, Elvis Andrus. I mean, he was 12th among shortstops in F4 last year. That's, not terrible. And coming to the Dodgers, for the most part, guys don't get worse. So it's very much, but like I said yesterday, it's one of those where if you sign him to be your shortstop and then you don't give Gavin Lux the option of, or the, to at least try shortstop, then you don't really know what you have. And you're just kind of stuck in the same perpetual cycle of, what do you have? And it's one of those where I think at this point, yeah, there's probably still moves to be made, but I do think that they're going to, Bush, Lux, Vargas, those guys are all going to get at least a chance. Bush being the least likely at this point, but at this point, he would, slot in at second base or at least in the bench role. So it's one of those where you try them out, you see what happens, and then at the deadline, more names open up. You'll have, they have those guys like Jorge Vivas and Eddie Leonard, who, if they have another solid season, they're on the Dodgers 40-man roster. Realistically, who knows if they're probably still a few years away. They're pretty young. So I don't know if it might be better served to use them in a deal potentially, or if Gavin Lux struggles in another team, you'd be selling low a little bit, but he's still a top prospect. So teams would still maybe trying to be going after him. I don't know. There's a lot of variations. It's a little bit like, the Doctor Strange stuff, where there's a lot of different ways this offseason can go, and they all lead to different things. But more and more it goes, it's not it maybe feels a little bit like apathy. Like, well, yeah, go ahead and let Lux play shortstop at this point. I'd rather have him than pay Dansby Swanson for 8 to 10 years. But it's also a matter of, okay, let's see what they got. You got to try these young guys out at some point, and it's a little bit risky trying multiple guys out at one time. But hey, if it works out like it has in the past, then they'll be sitting, not sitting pretty, but sitting pretty good.
Yeah, and you mentioned Elvis Andrews, who I had mentioned on yesterday's episode. I do need to point out he was my fifth pick out of five, and as a utility infielder, I am not even remotely interested in Elvis Andrews being the Dodgers starting shortstop. I am 184% confident that Gavin Lux will be better at shortstop than Elvis Andrews next year, both defensively and offensively. I'm really interested to see what happens with Dansby Swanson. Like, a lot of people are saying this is great news for Swanson because he's the last good shortstop on the board, all of that. But he's also noticeably and significantly worse than the other three guys who've gotten huge contracts. And yeah, the fact that he's the last one available and there's still multiple teams does mitigate some of that, but I still don't think he's going to get a crazy huge contract. I think he's going to get paid well, but I still think Dansby Swanson is a possibility for the Dodgers. I think he might be somewhere in their range, dollars wise and years wise, and I don't think it's likely necessarily, but I don't think that this necessarily means that Swanson's going to get a contract significantly bigger than what we expected, earlier before Correa signed.
Yeah, I'd like to think that, but just everyone that we've talked about has gotten a contract bigger than we thought. Brandon Nimmo got one, all the three shortstops, some of the pitchers so far. So unless every other team's like, oh no, we don't believe in Dansby Swanson at all, like teams like the Twins or even the Cardinals, then maybe it's very possible. Maybe Swanson wants to take a flyer year like Correa did and sign a short term high AAV deal, or high for him, not 35 mil, but maybe like 25, 30 mil, and maybe he wants to take that type of contract, opt out if he has a good year where there's not as many big names on the market next year. But yeah, I think it's one of those where if everyone you thought was going to get 8 years or so, 8 to 10, depending, Correa being 10 and the other two being 6 to 8, and they all got 11 plus, then in theory, you would think the market moves that way. But you could be right. I mean, it could not move that way. Every teams could not believe in him. But I don't know. I feel like it's going to be a desperate team.
Yeah, and these guys are getting long contracts because teams are being cheap and they don't want to pay a high AAV. And it's a different approach than the Dodgers take. And so, Swanson may end up getting the highest AAV of any of the four, despite being the worst of the four, because I could see him getting a 6-year, $200 million deal, which would put him at a higher AAV, I think, than any of those other three. I think they're all under 30. Uh, and that would be a win for him, getting more money per year. And it would also be a win for, I could see the Dodgers doing that deal. 6 years, 200 million wouldn't surprise me. And I think that might get it done for Swanson.
Yeah, we'll see. And I mean, I don't know if he's kind of the only guy at this point, so his market is going to go as the teams go. It might not, we might not see him sign tomorrow now. He might wait to see teams get more desperate as time goes by. So we'll continue to monitor the Dansby Swanson situation. But for what it seems like, unless there's I try to look at shortstop names and I didn't see anyone that stood out as a trade candidate. So we'll start the Gavin Lux shortstop, and we'll start the bid, and we'll keep it going, and we'll get on that train eventually, and we'll see what happens.
Hey, D Gordon's available.
I'm sure there's still Dodger fans that believe the Dodgers lost that trade and probably want D Gordon back, so he's fast. All right, so Giants just paid 350 mil, plus 25 mil to Ross Stripling, plus 20 some mil to Sean Manaea, plus 45 mil to Mitch Haniger, plus 20 mil to Jock Peterson. So they might not have room for Carlos Rodón. So that's what we're going to talk about next. We haven't talked about him in depth. There's rumors out there that he wants a 7-year deal. How far are we willing to go for Carlos Rodón? That's what we're going to get into. But first, thank you for listening to Locked On Dodgers. Thank you for making us your first listen of the day. Check out Locked On Sports today for your second listen of the day. For the games that matter the most to the biggest stories in sports, go beyond the scoreboard and behind the scenes with local experts and insights only Locked On can provide. Locked On Sports today, available wherever we get podcasts and on YouTube. All right, Jeff. So Carlos Rodón is probably him and Swanson are the two best free agents. Depending on how you feel, he might be the best free agent left available. The reports are that he wants a long-term deal. It started as around 6 years. There was somebody that reported 7 years. The Yankees seem to be in on him. The Giants could still be in on him, but it doesn't seem likely. I don't think the Mets will be on him, although the Mets were rumored to Carlos Correa right before he signed on Tuesday night. So maybe the Mets get thrown in there for whatever. The Twins have been named as a team. Now the Twins have all that money. They didn't pay Carlos Correa, so maybe they do go after him. But when it comes to the Dodgers, we've talked about how money doesn't matter and everything else, but you still working within the parameters of what we think they're doing. What's a deal that you think Carlos Rodón could get realistically from the Dodgers that they'd be willing to offer right now, the way this offseason's been going?
Yeah, so he's 30 years old, and he's had two good seasons in his career, and that's pretty much it. The last 2 years, he's been very, very good. Finished fifth in the AL Cy Young voting in 2021, sixth in the National League Cy Young voting in 2022. He's been very good. Before that, he has been both bad and unavailable. He hasn't pitched. He hadn't pitched. He hadn't qualified for a Cy Young or for an ERA title since his second year in baseball in 2016 until 2022. Even in 2021, when he finished fifth in the Cy Young voting, he only pitched 132 innings. He's been good, but he hasn't. And even this last year, he only pitched 178 innings, which it's a lot by Dodger standards. But he made 31 starts. He pitched a full season. But it's I keep thinking back to the Zach Greinke free agency when Greinke was coming off being the best pitcher in the National League, finished second in the Cy Young voting in 2015. I think he was second and Kershaw was third. I know that Arrieta won it. Anyway, Greinke was outstanding, but the Dodgers weren't willing to give him the years that he was looking for. And he ended up getting those years from the Diamondbacks, which was 6-year deal I think he got for the D-backs, and the Dodgers weren't willing to go to 6 years for Greinke, and he was roughly the same age that Rodón is now and had a significantly longer track record. Obviously, it's a different time than it was 7 years ago, and there are different pitchers, there are different types of pitchers, all those things. It's hard for me to see the Dodgers going more than 6 years for Rodón, maybe not even more than 5 years. And I don't know. It seems like that's probably not going to get it done. Although I don't think teams are quite as desperate for starting pitching as they were for a shortstop. And so we haven't seen the same crazy length on the starting pitcher deals as we have on the shortstop deals. So maybe they could get it done at 5 years if they offered enough per year. But it seems like that's probably as far as they'd want to go.
Yeah, the pitching market has definitely moved from last year. I mean, Kevin Gausman, who's coming off really good years, got 5 years, 110 million, and average annual value of 22 million. Which, if the Dodgers could get Rodón for 7 years for less than 150 million, which would be around 20 million or so a year, I would do that. I wouldn't. That it's not a lot of it's. If you're going to give them 5 years, 150 million, you can give them 7 years, 150 million. It helps you out either way. But from what we've seen, at least money wise, Taijuan Walker got 3 years, I think 18 mil a year. So Rodón's significantly better than Taijuan Walker. Not as durable, although Walker has had a couple injuries here and there. So it's a matter of I think the years don't matter as much if Rodón's not looking for 25 plus mil a year. If he's looking for 25 plus mil a year, then yeah, it comes down to probably 4 or 5 years for the Dodgers. But if it comes down to 20 to 25 mil, depending, and he wants 7 years, I think the Dodgers could be comfortable with that. It helps with your AAV, And realistically, 20, even if it is a full 25 mil in 6 years, let's just say he's only good for 4 more years, and okay, 25 mil in 5 more years is probably going to be the new, 15 mil now, the way things are going, the way money goes in general. So I feel comfortable with that. I don't know, I can't see him getting more than 25 mil a year unless it's somebody overpaying. Um, like, is someone going to give him 7 years, 200 plus mil? I don't think so. If someone does, then that's good on them. But if the Dodgers can get him for like under 200 mil, under one, around 175 or less for multiple years, even if it costs a couple extra years, I wouldn't be upset with that.
Yeah, I can see that. I expect him to be much closer to the 30 million a year mark, and that's kind of where I'm thinking that, I think the Dodgers would go 150, maybe even a little more than that on the AAV. Although, right now with the Dodgers actually for once considering the luxury tax, um, maybe they would go. I don't know. Maybe they would go a little bit longer for Rodon to lower the AAV. Where they're at right now. And it really, I don't know if we ever really got in depth. I don't know if you did on one of your solo episodes last week about the report about the Trevor Bauer appeal and how that's holding the Dodgers back. But really, it does seem like that's a question mark for them right now, because if Trevor Bauer wins his appeal or gets his suspension shortened, the Dodgers are on the hook this year for 30 something $1 million to Bauer, which puts them right up against the luxury tax, or at least close enough that they can't really afford to add anybody big and still stay under it. I don't know. It's well, I don't really expect Bauer's suspension to get overturned, but that's a different story. But it makes sense that they would have to wait and see for sure. Uh, Bill Shaken had said that they expected a decision maybe this month, and so maybe that's coming down soon, and maybe that's all the Dodgers are waiting for, and then they'll get involved in stuff. Hopefully, not all the free agents are gone by then, but if they don't have to pay Bauer, they could easily commit 25 to 30 million a year to Rodon, and still stay under the luxury tax. Uh, assuming they didn't do anything else big. And the fact is, there's not a lot of other big things left to do. And Rodon would help them in a lot of ways, just because, you win baseball games by scoring more runs than your opponents. And there are multiple ways to do that. And if they're going with several guys, several young guys on the offensive side of things, maybe it does help to have another star level pitcher helping prevent runs, because you are going to have some growing pains with Outman, and with Vargas and Bush if he's playing. You're going to have some of those growing pains, and so maybe more run prevention is the answer. Uh, Although I mean the Dodgers still already have a really good rotation, and that's kind of the other thing that we haven't even talked about is, if the Dodgers were to sign Rodon or any other pitcher, that takes away a spot from a guy like Bobby Miller later in the season, or Ryan Pepio, or some of these guys who, kind of like we were talking about with Lux earlier, you kind of have to see what you have. And, uh, I think Bobby Miller and Gavin Stone are both going to be ready for the big leagues this year. And yeah, there's going to be injuries. There's always injuries. And so maybe that just plays itself out. Even if they do sign Rodon, they have plenty of room to give starts to everybody who needs them. But, you know, when you're looking at, one of the things we said about Kiermaier the other day was, is it worth giving him millions of dollars when he's only a marginal upgrade over what you had, and he takes away playing time from a guy like James Outman, who you're trying to see what you have? And it's kind of a similar situation here. Is it worth giving lots of millions of dollars to Rodon, who more than a marginal upgrade for sure, but in the long term, if he takes away development time from Bobby Miller and Gavin Stone, maybe that's not worth it. I don't know.
Yeah, to me, if your rotation right now is Julio, Kershaw, Gonsolin, May, and then one of multiple guys, yeah, I'm not counting on those guys to all make 25, 30
You're counting on the
starts.
injury angle for sure. Yeah.
Injury or just, in general, right? Kershaw, and even if he doesn't get hurt, he's probably not going to be making 30 starts. Gonsolin and May, potentially could make 30 starts, but they haven't done so yet in their career before. And then, Pepio, Jackson, Grove, Miller, Stone, whoever ends up being five, if that's the way they keep it right now, they're not all going to be making multiple starts. So you kind of treat it like you had Walker Buehler, or you were planning on having Walker Buehler before he got hurt last year. So, you slot that in and he's taking those starts, and that's the way it goes. And even then, you're not really counting on Rodon to make 30 starts either. So it's it can go either way. It can go a few ways. I think the big part too with him, and is like I said yesterday, you're hedging a little bit if Julio leaves, because if Julio leaves, then now he slots in and you have a guy for 5 more years or whatever they sign him to. Um, it is interesting that Rodon has Boris as his agent. So as we know, the Dodgers and Boris and quite haven't quite worked out in terms of signing players. So that's another part of it. But yeah, I think it makes sense, and you wouldn't take away too much development. And then because right now you're counting on a lot of development happening, because one of your right now currently your fifth starter is going to be somebody that's never made more than like 10 starts in the majors.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, realistically, Rodon makes your team better, and it's probably worth getting him if the price isn't too unreasonable. You mentioned Boris, though, so chances are the price might be too unreasonable.
So we'll see. All right, Jeff, you got anything else before we head out?
No, this was yeah, nice of them to give us something to talk about. We hardly even got to get to Ross Stripling, but I guess within 12 hours of our episode with me saying the Dodgers should sign Correa and Stripling, within 12 hours of that dropping, the Giants signed both of those guys. So I assume they'll send me a cut of their check. I assume I did something to make that happen. So you're welcome, Ross.
Yeah, there you go. All right, that's going to do it for today's episode. Thank you all for listening. Thank you for making Locked On Dodgers your first listen of the day every day. Make sure to subscribe so you can be sure that it's your first listen of the day. And then check out the Locked On Sports podcast for your second listen, the biggest stories of the day, plus instant reactions, big game recaps, and the take of the day, available wherever you get podcasts and on YouTube. You can find us on social media, Twitter and Instagram at Locked On Dodgers. Jeff is on Twitter at Snydog. I'm at Vince Samperio. DMs are open on all those accounts if you need to get a hold of us for any questions, comments, concerns. You can also do that via email, lockedondodgers@gmail.com, or via voicemail text at 323-863-5625. We're here every weekday morning, and we hope you'll be with us when you get in your car or if you're at home. To your smart device, play podcast, Locked On Dodgers. And remember, you don't have to agree. You just have to listen. Have a good one.
We'll talk to you tomorrow.